are so many moving parts that go into creating a game that's both enjoyable and playable that it's almost a sure thing that there will be at least some issues preventing a game from reaching its full success. Even titles considered masterpieces are still prone to a few criticisms, as this list may attest. I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 worst parts of 5-star video games. Number 10. Repetitive fetch quests. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Side quests in video games are intended to be fun, light-hearted adventures to distract the player from the bloodshed and hostility that is ongoing in whichever fictional part of Earth they're located. And they usually are fun, often containing ludicrous quests that make you question the very integrity of the game in question. Sometimes though, video games can exploit these quests. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt side quests aren't especially dull or sluggish like other RPG titles can be, but they do become repetitive over time, rendering their inclusion a time-consuming monstrosity that may turn you off completing them. They become particularly repetitive when the player is roughly halfway through the main story, with gamers often required to travel some distance away from where they started in order to complete certain quests. Even in doing so, this journey will conclude with the player speaking to an NPC, and that's it. This is simple and doesn't ask for any heavy lifting that may be required in a combat-related quest, but are they really worth the hassle or time? Number 9. Wrong Side of the Tracks. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. It's a statement chiseled into the mind of everyone who picked up a copy of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ.
Wrong Side of the Tracks is the 16th main mission in the title and indisputably GTA's most rage quit inducing. It's a simple concept, driving Big Smoke via motorcycle as he chases a group of rivals aboard a train. It was too simple to be that easy though. Nobody completed it on their first attempt, and those who ultimately did finish it seriously considered lobbing their console out the window at one point. The mission was an arduous, distressing task that put players off the game's missions and into a frenzied 5-star wanted level state of mind across San Andreas. The joke is that following the damn train was impossible given the relatively slow speed of the motorcycle in comparison. That the moving gang members were on top of the train as opposed to roaming through its carriages added unnecessary pain to players. Riding alongside the train, as was common practice for the mission, restricted Big Smoke's aim, meaning players had to find higher ground before even contemplating the mission's completion. It almost made you wish CJ had never known Big Smoke, simply so that he wouldn't have been roped in as the driver. Number 8. Platforming. Doom Eternal. This can be discussed on a player-by-player basis, and it is ad nauseum in the WhatCulture office. Seriously, the only thing we haven't done is draw literal battle lines because we don't want to scuff up the carpet. While some fans thoroughly enjoy it, many argue that the platforming in 2020's Doom Eternal isn't good. First-person platforming is always a struggle, but some found the mechanics in this game tricky to grasp, resulting in many players quickly taking to online forums to voice their discontent. Given how evidently tiringly id Software worked to incorporate platforming while maintaining Doom's established skin as an FPS, Eternal is more entertaining when played as a shooter. And so these interruptions of wall jumping were met with aggravation, especially as they grow in difficulty in later stages. Doom Eternal is a fundamentally solid game, comparatively trouncing its predecessors in most departments, particularly as it pertains to its level design, visuals and soundtrack, but it deserves a spot on this list as many feel the platforming aspects are superfluous and greatly hold it back from being a worthy sequel to Doom's 2016 outing. And other people, well, they like fun, so Number 7. Malaria. Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 was ostensibly an illustrious video game, but no one dares mention it. The game puts you in control of one of 9 available mercenaries in the midst of an African civil war. Arguably, Far Cry 2 is the most elegant of the 6 main Far Cry titles, receiving plenty of plaudits for its open world design and the buddies mechanic. Its ambition and drive to try unique things is honourable, but Far Cry 2 will always fall down in the face of its successor. Its one glaringly obvious issue is its use of malaria. The protagonist is contaminated with the deadly disease, which becomes a prominent part of the game's storyline to such an extent that, when in the midst of a strenuous battle, you'll be reminded of your looming demise and are required to take your prescribed medication. Worse yet, there's the chance you'll run out of meds, taking the buzz out of the fight. When you do run out, you're required to travel across the map in a game with little to no fast travel options to get your dose. It's an eternal process given that you can't stock up on meds, so be prepared to rage quit and never return to the otherwise fun title. Number 6, The Dam, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Successfully creating an underwater level in a video game that is both playable and unrestricted control-wise is a mortally harrowing task for game developers. 1989's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES achieved this, but it wasn't enjoyable in any sense. The aim of The Dam, ironically named given that players will certainly utter an expletive or two when trudging through the 140-second mission, is to subdue a series of underwater bombs that, if detonated, will destroy a dam. Much like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas' easy on paper, aggressively difficult in execution, wrong side of the tracks mission, there is a glut of issues plaguing your road to success. Tight paths, electric fences, marine life who will easily eradicate you, and the preposterous time limit. It was a trauma-inducing level for many who played, or attempted to play, through the level in the 90s, resulting in many calling it a day without finishing the mission, and thus the game itself. Such achingly back-breaking missions have their place when done right. The Dam could have been one of them, all the mechanics were there for a successful underwater level. Instead, Konami opted to torture their fanbase over several 2-minute 20-second periods. Number 5, no combat movement, Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is oft heralded as the premium Resi experience, either being top or second on most critics' lists, their preference for Resident Evil 2 dependent. RE4 is the game that revolutionised the franchise, shifting in favour of an action horror art style that included the use of quick-time events and melee attacks and a new over-the-shoulder third-person perspective. It was a strange advancement for the series, but it could be described as a necessary move to keep Resident Evil rolling with the times. What makes it feel dated now, though, was the inability to move Leon while in combat. Only the camera could have its position adjusted, meaning Leon was routed to the same spot if engaged in warfare. This was done to keep the strain on the player, but over time the mechanic grew to become more of a headache than it was a unique way of handling combat, meaning that the player was often assassinated with a cheap hit that would have been avoidable in literally every other survival game ever. As it was, Resi 4 revolutionised over-the-shoulder combat, but it's just this little thing that stops it from being a total wonder. Number 4, Roman's persistent phone calls, Grand Theft Auto 4. Grand Theft Auto 4 remains in the conversation for the best iteration to the GTA franchise ever. Its narrative, visuals, vast New York-inspired open world, and minor details often give it the advantage over Grand Theft Auto 5. If you've played both though, you'll lean in favour of GTA 5 on the basis that it doesn't include Roman Bellic. A once engaging character, players' taste for protagonist Nico's cousin quickly soured upon him constantly blitzing Nico's phone with invitations for a range of in-game activities, Roman's particular favourite being bowling. It became near impossible to travel anywhere in Liberty City without Nico's phone ringing for the 27th invitation to bowling that week, irrelevant to the fact that you possibly just went. It became such a tormenting aspect of GTA 4 that if the option presented itself to either save Roman from Russian mobsters or sacrifice him, the Bellic family Christmas dinner would have an empty seat. Inexplicably, the perpetual phone calls continued in Grand Theft Auto Online 5 years later. Spearheaded by Lester, it seemed that anyone who had your phone number would ring you every minute, or while you were trying to evade the police in a 5-star chase across Los Santos. Number 3, Dialogue, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Nintendo's 6th official Animal Crossing title was thrust into the world when everything else was thrust out, hitting shelves on the 20th of March 2020, 9 days after COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. It hit at the right time since most people weren't allowed to do anything but relax, so picking up a Nintendo Switch, creating their computerized island of tranquility, and switching off from the overwhelming events in the real world was many people's response. You needn't listen to the conflicting and horrifying political discourse of the real world when you can listen to the villagers in Animal Crossing go on and on, and on and on and on about whatever gibberish they had to tell you. It was a setback, albeit a minor setback, that hampered the progression of Animal Crossing New Horizons. The game was designed perfectly to be picked up and played at a moment's notice, but the relentlessly exhausting dialogue would have turned casual gamers off, and it did. Animal Crossing's villagers could interrupt whatever you were doing to talk about their day, and oh no, suddenly I'm having Roman Bellic flashbacks. It's no surprise that many gave up on the incessant villager waffle for good as soon as they could go back outside. Number 2, weapon durability. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Weapon durability only works well in video games where weapons spontaneously breaking is supposed to happen. In the WWE 2K series, you can only hit an adversary with a kendo stick or a steel chair so many times before it either snaps or dents so much it's unusable. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild should not rely on such a system at all. No longer could you find a cool weapon and stick with it throughout the entire game, as, in a manner to encourage variety, Nintendo opted to have such weapons break over time, meaning your favoured blade of choice was restricted by its lifespan. It must be stated that, in a way, this does pressure fans into thinking about which weapons to use and when to use them. Saving the better weapons for the tougher challenges, for example, is the point Nintendo attempted to convey with the introduction of such an alienating system. For many players, that wasn't the point that came across. Instead, many considered the experience hampered by an unbalanced and punishing system. And number 1, the Batmobile, Batman Arkham Knight. That it took Warner Bros. 3 games before opening the door of the Batmobile to players should be reason enough to understand how deceived Batman Arkham Knight's community felt when the Caped Crusader's famed vehicle was usable in the 2015 title. It became quickly obvious that there were no thoroughly discussed ideas on how best to implement the car into the game because you were made to get behind the wheel at every imaginable opportunity. Puzzles, battles and races were in abundance in the title as developer Rocksteady's use of the Batmobile became so aggressively over the top, being heavily reliant on the vehicle to make the game a success. It was basically like Rocksteady was saying, oh, you want the Batmobile, do you? Well, here you go, it's all you get. And the issue is that the remainder of Arkham Knight is generally considered to be prosperous and an improvement over the preceding Batman Arkham City from 4 years prior. Extensive praise is often directed at its opening sequence, combat and gameplay, but the Batmobile's overuse is its leading talking point, taking discussion away from what should be heralded as a modern video game classic. Driving the Batmobile is actually rather enjoyable in small chunks too, but it was just too much. Whilst these otherwise great games had little issues that sullied the experience, how about going the other way with it? You might enjoy this video on screen now for genius gameplay tricks that made video games even better. Don't forget to leave a comment down below on otherwise brilliant games that are let down by one mechanic here or there. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, hit that notification bell and head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Si for WhatCulture and have a good week.